Hi, Jackie Monahan.
Hi.
I love your hairdo.
It's in honor
Dun,
of Tony
dun.
Kane, honor of, oh, look at these tulips. Beautiful.
Yeah, they're Mother's Day. They're gay Mother's Day tulips.
Tiptoe through the tulips. Renee, how are you?
How are you? Hi, everybody. Welcome to Never Normal. I'm Renee Santos. You are?
Jackie Monahan. We're both comics, sober, PTSD. What else? What else? Comedians, actors, writers. We keep finding out new stuff that we're like about.
Totally. We're multi-hyphenate. We're scary and damaged, which brings us to our topic for today's show. The template for why we're so scary and damaged, our relationships with our mother. Yay! Dun, dun, dun. We're talking about all things moms. So if you are a mom or not a mom or have a reason why you don't want to be a mom or want to be a part of this conversation, join us. Get involved.
Or you came from a mom.
Or you came from mom, or if you have a mom. If you've ever exited a vagina in your life,
There
whether
you
you're
go.
a lesbian or not.
There you go.
Join the conversation.
If you were born the natural way, vagina on your face. Your mom's vagina was on your face.
I feel like we should just repeat vagina over and over again so that if people just walk into the live stream right now, they'll be locked in because they're like, did they say vagina? Right? Isn't that called cocktail party phenomenon where you like hear somebody say something really like incriminating or controversial and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. And later we are going to have the #1 mom comic of all time, Jan Davidson. But that's later.
That's later. So stay tuned. She'll be on at 4:30 to tell us all there is to know about being a mom and an artist, which is why Jackie and I have avoided it at all costs.
No babies.
No babies. Yeah. And we instead of calling this episode Never Normal Moms, we should have called it Exiting a Vagina at some point in your life.
Yeah.
We'd have more views right now.
Do you have people ask you why you don't have? I've had people be like, why you ain't got no babies?
Oh, I get it all the time now, which is so incredibly weird for me because when I was younger, like I was a nanny, as you know, I was a nanny for many years. So many people like thought I was a mom, or when people like asked me, I was in my early 20s, when people would ask me if I was a mom, I was like, are they being racist because I'm a Latina and they just assume because, you know, but then now I'm like, wait, I don't think it's racism anymore. I'm in my 40s. Now it's like strange. Like, you're not a mom.
Right,
you know what I mean? And I spent so much of my life, people like thinking I was a mom because I was a nanny. It's a weird transition, but.
And people are always like to me, like, how are you going to feel complete as a woman? And it's always asked by somebody that I'm like, this person should not have a child.
Totally.
Like, I don't want to, like, you shouldn't have a child unless you are complete as a woman and then have the child.
Yeah. So it's so weird, like how being a woman is sort of a bizarre thing because I feel like our bodies are much more physically capable younger, but like our brains and our human experience is not capable till later. So I feel like we were just designed poorly in some ways where I'm like, how does this work? Like, I don't want to live vicariously through the next generation, which I think so many people do.
I don't want to.
And you know what they've called a woman who's had 3 kids, Jackie, right?
What?
You don't know what a woman who's had 3 kids is called?
No.
Ruined.
Yikes! Yikes!
That's me.
What did I want to tell you?
I'm joking.
I read. Wait till you hear this crazy thing. You're going to be like, Jackie, can you please stop talking about aliens? But I read.
Audience, Jackie believes in aliens. It's very interesting. Do tell.
I read that. I mean, I don't know how much I believe this, but it's so interesting to me that our race was really like Sasquatch kind of. And the aliens came and mated with us. So we're all part alien. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is why the women are in so much pain having children, because our bodies weren't designed to have that big of children.
Ooh.
And that's why other animals, like the animal just pops out. But we're like, ugh.
That is sort of crazy.
Yeah, they said that was a big mistake and they're sorry.
Hello, Sarah Lynn Glazer. Sarah Lynn Glazer, are you a mom? I mean, you have a mom or had a mom. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, we're talking about moms and aliens. That is a really interesting concept because I do feel like, wow, like I understand our bodies are sort of incredible in many ways. Like even not being a mom and going through this whole like spinal surgery procedure this past year, my spinal surgeon they've really started on women doing the anterior procedure where even if you fuse the spine, they go through the front of your body through a C-section incision, move all those fucking organs outside, put them on the table, right? And then fix your spine. And they're like, yeah, we can do this with women's bodies because women's bodies just like bounce right back because whether or not you're a mom physically, the female body is designed for all that stuff to just shift and move.
Wow. So men are screwed if they needed spinal surgery?
Yeah, so like it's really moving toward this. Like women who need spinal surgery, they do it through the front of the body because the recovery rate is so much higher. And for men, they do it through the back of the body. I mean, it's new in the United States, but like as I've been going through this research and meeting with different surgeons of whether or not I'm the candidate for it and yada, 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 like that's been the discussion is like, I think we should really, oh, look, Sarah says she's a dog mom and a great aunt. Being an aunt is the best role in the entire world. I agree. Because you get to have that like mom thing, but then give them back at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, I'm an only child. Boo. But the good news is we're lesbians. So we're can marry women who can have children.
Yeah, like now, definitely can have. You know what I think is really interesting though about lesbians? Like speaking of moms and relationships with moms, like with my ex, we were going through the fertility process and looking to have a child. And my mom, the whole argument of it's not natural and science and blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff, which was like really problematic for me. And I had that moment where I'm like, don't you think what's amazing about gay people having kids is at least our kids are really intentional? Right? Like you have to really want them. You can't be 16 and drunk and just like fucking accidentally have a kid, not that every straight person is doing that, but I'm like, how is that a more natural way to bring a human being onto this planet?
Two things. Speaking of aliens don't mate with their bodies anymore. It's all on purpose. And two, I was watching a special with my mom. When I was a kid, and it was all about two women trying to adopt a child or have a child. And my mother was like, that's not fair. You shouldn't bring a child into that. Like they weren't asked to have two moms, and like rage flew out of my body. I was like, do you think for 1 minute I would want dad as my dad? You're insane. I would love to have those two moms as my parents. Love it. Like I was just like, in 2 seconds, I was just like, so mad.
I know the whole conversation does not make sense to me. But as an alien caveat, I'm sort of like going off in a diatribe. But since you believe in aliens, I'm really interested to ask you this question. So, like, have you ever read the book Sphere? Not the movie. They made a really bad movie with Sharon Stone years later. But the book Sphere, where it talks about like how our concept of an alien really is just like human evolution, and that it's like the anthropomorphic projection of what we are actually evolving to. And I find that very interesting. Like basically our heads will get really, really big because we're staring at computer screens and it's all brain matter. That is our survival mechanism. So our brains get really big. And because we're no longer speaking and we're only communicating through a computer, like our mouths will get very small, and our noses are actually used in order for us to walk and balance. Like the nostrils is what allows us to breathe. We don't have noses to breathe. We have noses to walk, right? To create balance. And so the eyes don't get cross-eyed. And so that's why like the image of the alien, they don't actually have noses. They just have nostrils because they're not getting up and they're moving, and like their eyes get really huge and they lose the white corneas in their eyes and they're only rods, because when you're processing like LED light and a lot of imagery on computers, you need like the dark parts of your eyes more than you need the whites of your eyes. So our eyes will get really big, and then our phalanges will get really, really, really long because we're typing so much, but we're not using them for other things like lifting or throwing balls or all of this stuff, right? And so we end up having these really long, lanky arms, and our physical bodies are so small because we're not doing stuff. We're not like out, and and our skin becomes gray, and we almost become neutral in race because we're not exposed to the sun, and we're no longer procreating the same way. And like, so when I thought about that, I'm like, that's really freaking interesting, that who knew that we were accidentally just predicting our own evolution.
That makes so much sense. Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like there are some planets and some space and time, like dimension, where that has happened, and some where people, I think the Palladians, they live very happily and in nature and evolve beautifully, but other aliens haven't. But the whole thing is, they are all evolved to know now that what you put out in the world comes back. So they do their best, like us with our programs, to do it right or fix it fast. Like it says in the big book, there is no freedom like doing what you ought to do when you ought to do it. And that's what they believe as well. So we don't have to,
which is not what my mother believed.
Right. So
which is another great segue of one of the reasons why being a mom is such a tough thing, because we individualize, right? Like, I honestly think this is a great segue, because I was like a weird kid that wanted to have these conversations. Like, I had to read this book, Fear and Hiding, because like I wanted to climb trees and like dig in the dirt and like discover science and have really bizarre conversations. And all of that was really judged as like controversial and not feminine and not ladylike, and like girls don't sit around talking about this stuff or intellectualizing. Like even that, like my mother was so traditional in that way that having any type of intellectual contemplation about anything was like not ladylike. Like she was really, really traditional in that way. Like she believes the man should be the breadwinner and we should listen to them. And even as her role, like there was nothing empowered or feminist about my mother.
Wow.
At all, you know, like she really believed that we should listen to the man and that our value really only matters if we're like matched up with a good man.
Oh my.
Still to this day. At my sister Nina's wedding, I will never forget, because I was a bridesmaid. You know, like in weddings, they pair you up. And so I was walking, I think with her husband at the time, PJ's, I want to say it was his brother, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But anyway, it was a guy. It was a man. And so like I'm in a dress and I'm arm in arm with a man, and my mom pulls me out from the aisle and says, "This day, you've just made my day, seeing you in the arm of a man."
I'm
Took
so
time
sorry,
to
Renee.
interrupt my sister's wedding to say that.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Craziness. Like she believes this, like to the core of her being, that I will never be a full human being because I am not next to a man.
Yeah. My mom, I told my mom that I did drugs, that I tried every drug there was. I told her a bunch of different things that I did that weren't great, that I don't need to share on here, because I want her to see what, I told her I was in jail. Like I told her all this stuff because I wanted her to see what all the abuse I had did to me. And but she was just like, oh well, la la la, because nobody could see that on me. And then when I started dating my ex-wife and said I was going to get married, she cried nonstop because people would know that she wasn't a good mother because I was with a woman. And she went to therapy for that. And that's my joke. I'm like, if I had known that would have made her go to therapy, I would have came out when I was 3 because she needed to go to therapy.
That is a really funny joke, but yeah,
but
that's
very true. But it broke my heart that my finding love, that's what brought her into therapy, not all the abuse I went through. And then abusing my own body. It's like, oh well, nobody can see that. La la la. I was just like, oh, it killed me. Then, so she didn't want me to marry the woman. And then she fell in love with my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time. And then when I said I was getting divorced, she called me crying in the middle of the night, like, you're cutting off my arm. You're cutting off my arm. Like, how can you take her away from me? Not caring about me at all. And now she talks about me negatively to my ex-wife's new wife.
That's crazy sauce.
Yeah.
Dude, this is why another thing we can add to the list of what makes us like so similar. We also have really convoluted, layered, like distorted relationships with our mom, because I have the same thing too, where I'm like, I want to be able to like, I weirdly still have this thing where I like want her approval. I remember when my album came out, my comedy album that we did together, like it was that moment I hadn't talked to my mother in 7 years. And I'm like, this is a big moment. Like my first comedy album.
Yeah, never.
And even though she gives me like amazing
every time. Yeah.
I called her and like she Googled me for the first time and was like, it was this fucked up thing where she didn't know that I was working as much as I was. Like, so it was a weird comment of like, oh, like you really do this, but you sold your soul and you get up there. And my mom has lived in Boston forever, you know, and she's like, does the whole like, you tell people that you're Latina and you're lesbian, like the alliteration, like it's ringing, like it's a marketing ploy, like it sounds good together, Latina, lesbian, you know, and that's where my mom's like, what are you going to just tell people you're the brown part of the rainbow? And that's where, for those of you who don't know, I wrote a parody called Brown Part of the Rainbow. That literally came from a conversation I had with my mother when the first time she had ever discovered my comedy. Like she completely character assassinated me and just told me, but yet gave me gold, because the first parody I ever recorded, Brown Part of the Rainbow, was literally words that came out of my mother's face.
Yeah. They do give us gold, and I don't think that we're damaged. I feel like we've healed ourselves, and we've gotten to go to like those darkest places and heal them and forgive our moms, which is
totally
beautiful.
And the fact that those can live, don't you feel like those can live simultaneously? Because that was a lot of my work for a long time too.
Yeah.
I thought I had to hold on to it because the absence of my mother sort of defined who I was. So like if I forgave her and I moved on, like who was I? And so I didn't realize that I could have both. Like I could forgive her and give her permission to like live her life and just respect her limitations and not try to change her, at the same time that I could be like, this vacancy exists. Like the fact that at 40 years old, like I still want to call my mom and like I can't. And that still is something I think that can't be filled. But I've learned really strong ways to self-soothe that I think have been really important. I think one of the reasons I'm able to be of service to other people in a really deep level comes from like my lack of connection with her. It's almost like in the absence of her, I learned how to be present for other people. It's so incredible.
You learn to be present for yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, our relationships with our mother are very layered. And I think as women too, needing a female role model is when you don't have that, when you're becoming a woman, I think there's something that subconsciously happens that there are times where it still surprises me, where I'm not entirely cognizant of like why I have angst in a certain area, or when the most, you probably could relate to this, but like when I show up in relationships, that's when I'm like, when I feel the most damage from my relationship with my mother, I'm like, it's in my partnerships when I'm like, ooh, this is all mommy shit, you know? Yeah. And it like surprises me, you know?
Yeah.
Come on. Does anybody else who's watching today have any mommy stuff beyond?
The forgiveness though, the forgiveness is everything. Like, it's just like they've always said, like, forgive to set yourself free, but I didn't understand it until I finally figured out how to do it. And that has made all the difference on the planet. So now my mom can just be her and I can be me, and like she can say things and it cannot affect me, or I have a million people to talk to be like, yeah, Jackie, you're fine, it's okay, you felt that way, but I can keep
it also allows, I think, for me, like to create boundaries now that like the older I've gotten, like when the few times that I do talk to her, I talk to her maybe twice a year, you know, like whenever she starts to do like the whole Jesus can change me thing. And I'm like, these are the things that are off topic, you know, off the table. Like if you decide to go there, like this conversation will end, mom, you know? And it's like, sometimes she does talk to me in a certain way where I'm like, I'm not the 14-year-old little girl that you left. Like that's kind of her stopping point, because I moved out of my mother's house when I was 14, that she still talks to me like I'm that abandoned 14-year-old girl. And I'm like, I have to remind her that I'm like, I'm a grown up now and I make my own choices, and like I now like I can still forgive you and love you and discern whether or not you're a healthy energy in my life. Like I'm not going to invite toxicity in my life, so like I don't engage with her at that level anymore, but like I'm
Yeah.
also human, and I find like my sisters have completely cut her off, and I think there's a lot of freedom in that. And I have this thing where every couple of years I circle back, Jackie, and then I kick myself for doing
Right,
it.
right. I think it's important to normalize not talking to parents, because a lot of women or men, whatever, need to not talk to their parents to move forward in their lives. And they're spoken to horribly by other people, like, oh, you got to talk, just dismissed. Oh, you got to
Or
talk
you
to
only have
your
one
mother.
mother, you only, yeah, and you're like
Like,
that
don't
there's some type of
dismiss.
loyalty.
Like, don't dismiss where I am. And what it does, though, it's always made me have a really strong connection with my friends. I've always had
Yeah.
really good friends.
Like deep, authentic relationships, because like I've realized as an adult, like when I was a little girl, like that is when we are victims, but like when we're adults, we get to decide how people treat us,
Right.
And like I'm at that place now where I'm like, no, like you don't get to treat me like that. But then there are these moments, like a few years ago, my mother came to my sister's house in the Berkshires, and it had been many years, like 7 or 8 years. None of us had seen her in a very long time. And my mother asked me to walk down to the stream with her. And number one, it was weird because me and my mother alone in a space together had probably not happened in 20 years.
Wow.
Like it was just her and I in a space, and my heart was racing, and it just felt weird. Like I was with this weird stranger, but she looked like me. It was just this sort of bizarre moment for me. But then like I saw there was this really beautiful sort of innocent moment of healing for both of us where we went down the stream and we took our shoes off, and I realized I had my mother's feet.
Aww.
And it was that moment where I'm like, I felt my origin. Like I felt my connection to my origin. And as ugly as my relationship was with her, like I kind of have weird feet. Like I have a long second toe, and I'm like, where the fuck did I get
That means you're
these feet from?
intelligent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. But like
And an
that
alien.
moment where it did feel special, and I'm like, what is that? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that feeling of no matter what has happened in this dynamic with my mother, like I can still have that like sentimental moment when I see that I have the same feet.
It's interesting that people want that so badly with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They want that recognition, kind of, and it's just embedded in us. I remember I hadn't talked to my mom in a really long time, and I went a whale watching, and I saw a mom whale with the kid, and I just started crying, and I called my mom, and I was like, I saw a mom whale with the kid, and I hadn't talked to her for so long, and I'm like, it just made me think of us, or something like that. And she was like, it makes me think of me and my cat. That's what she said. So I was just like done. Like
done. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, mom relationships are so incredibly weird. I'm actually rewriting my screenplay. I wrote a screenplay many, many years ago called In the Absence of You, and it was about being put in the foster care system as a teenager and losing my mom, this relationship with my mother. And I'd gotten into a bunch of like festivals, but like I was applying to screenwriting festivals to get produced. And I had gotten into Outfest in just the original screening of Outfest in the lab. And during the panel, they said to me, the reason why they didn't want to make my film is my mother was too antagonistic. She didn't have a redeeming quality. And that every villain still has some type of redeeming quality. And I remember that being really hard for me to hear, and I kind of abandoned that script. And this was in 2016, and I had not revisited it at all until last year, literally during all of this coronavirus, quarantine, craziness. My mother is going through her own personal existential crisis, as we all were very contemplative during this time. And my mother calls me. I think I've told you about this a little bit, but it was sort of hilarious because me, I'm not very tech savvy, but my mother has a fucking flip phone. So I am like an online genius, according to her. You know what I mean? And so like she sees my website, and even though she completely character assassinates everything that I represent as an artist and thinks what I do is horrible, she's like, but who built your website? And I was like, I'm sorry, wait, what? I'm like, I built my website like on GoDaddy, like it was like a template. It's a thing. It's fine, Mom. You want a link to go? I'll give you the number to GoDaddy or whatever. Like, why do you want to build a website? And that's when like this shift happened in me. And the first time in my life, I found my mother's redeeming quality. So when in 1986, my Aunt Lizzie was killed in a car accident. And they never found out who killed her. And this story had gone from possibly a car accident to a homicide and all of the whatever. There was this big coroner's report. And so my mother wanted me to design a website to see if we could open this cold case for Lizzie, because my mom, her whole life had been tortured about what had happened to Lizzie and whatever. And it was like this first moment in my life, my mother mails me the coroner's report. And here I am at 39 years old, and the first time in my life realizing why my mother couldn't handle raising her kids, because like she was obsessed with their story. There was layers of post-it note after post-it note where each year she was rereading the coroner's report and writing more notes down about like what she thought she saw in the car, and the shoe was on this side and this, and it was crazy, like dating it, and this 1986 and 1987 and 1992, and then this, she had read it and reread it and reread it, and phone calls to investigators and trying to reopen the cases. And when I saw the obsession in my mother simply by looking at this coroner's report, and I saw all of the pain in her, it made me realize, like, for the first time in my life, I saw her humanity. And although I still could separate, like, I don't want to have a relationship with this woman, because her concept was still like Lizzie was suffering and she had to rescue her. This website had to come from fixing that. And Lizzie had been gone for so many years. She wasn't suffering. It was my mother who was suffering, you know,
Right.
and ultimately, like, you know, I kind of walked through her creating this site and gave her links and whatever. But I realized, like, if I could add that story to the screenplay, that was my mother's redeeming quality. And the point in me sharing that story is that in all of this, like the way that we raise our children and all of that scary damagedness that comes, there's this like backstory that keeps us so limited. You know what I mean? And I think that was my mother's story. And it was I had a deep shift I had already forgiven her for me to be able to even take that phone call. Do you know what I mean? But for the first time in my life, I saw her as a human and not just as my mother.
Right.
know?
Right.
And I think that was like an important shift for
That's
me.
what I do with my mother. Like I see her innocence. Like when you condemn somebody, you're condemning yourself. When you bless someone, you bless yourself. Like, so I do my best to bless her all the time. And, you know, she makes comments that hurt me. I'll never know if they're on purpose or not. But I know she does love me. And I want to have the rest of her life. I'm hoping we can have some sort of relationship. But I just want to make sure no matter what, I keep my side of the road clean and continue to see her innocence, whether she's in my life or not.
I agree with that. Do you think that your desire to not have kids comes from your dynamic with your mother, or do you think those are separate things?
I think I really enjoy my life, and I don't want to outsource it. I really don't. I like, just as a little kid, I remember people being like, oh, that's not for me, that's for them. You know, I was just like, no, I want to always be the one that's dancing. I want to always be the one that's doing that. I don't want to be like, let me sit back and watch somebody else do it. Like it's like, I love sports, but watching them, I don't like. I like to do it. And like, I love improv, but I can't watch it because I want to be doing it. Like watching stand-up is hard unless it's really good because I want to be doing it. Yeah, I like being in action. It's like it's hard for me to just watch a movie. Like I want to do other stuff at the same time. Yeah, so outsourcing a child. And also, I think a big part of it, so that part, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that might just be me. But the part that I think really made me not want to have children is I always worried about myself. I didn't feel safe. So as I got older, I feel more and more safe. And I didn't want to have to then have a child and worry about them. Like
it's a lot of scary responsibility in many ways, and like accidentally messing them up. Like I was a nanny for 22 years, and it's interesting because people always tell me, oh, the best kind of birth control is being a lesbian. I'm like, no, you know what the best kind of birth control is? Being a fucking nanny. That is, whoo! Because I've had a lot of kids. And what's interesting about being a nanny versus a parent is I've had like a bunch of different kids with different upbringings from different households that are the same age that will consistently have the same behavior. So like behaviorally, I think I understood children more than a parent, because like an 8-year-old just had, a parent that only has 2 8-year-olds only experiences an 8-year-old twice. Like I've had 16 8-year-olds.
Right.
It's almost like being a teacher in that way,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of it. Like I've accidentally said stuff that I think like, I've nannied for boys that are so obsessed, like, they're obsessed with their dicks, like boys are just obsessed with their dicks. And like every time I would see a little kid, like I would be like, stop it. And I attached so much shame to it. And I didn't realize like, that's also bad because that's their bodies.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, then you see them get older and you're like, oh, did I fuck them up? Like the last thing I want them to do is like be filled with shame about touching their own bodies. But because like I had my own stuff around it, like I didn't want to see it and I thought it was gross. And so there's a part of me that's like, I haven't processed why I have issues with this. Like for me to accidentally project that onto another human, like I am not healed enough or well enough to parent.
Right. I always thought I would be a good mom. And people would say that to me, like, Jackie, you'd be a great mom. And I would be like, yeah, and make a good prostitute too, but I'm never gonna want to do that. Like it doesn't mean I should do it. But I never thought that I would damage them. And I had a friend who I used to bartend and he would come in and he would be like, Jackie, his name was Frank Federici. And he was like, you got to have a kid. He's like, cause you're a kid. Like people will knock on the door and be like, can Johnny come out and play? And he'd be like, no, I want to hang out with my mom. Like, he's like, you'd be the best mom, but it just I never wanted, pardon me?
I was going to say, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like, I so relate to that. And you can't change your mind. Like I moved to New York City for 5 years. Like it was great. It was an awesome chapter in my life. But then I was like, it's not for me. I'm West Coast bound. And I went back to like LA, and like that decision to have that freedom to be like, I can recalibrate. It made it less scary for me to move to New York City 5 years ago, because I'm like, LA's still always there. But like you can't take back a kid. Like once you've made a kid, like you're fucked. Like you can't, that's what frightens me, is like, I don't want to regret this kid and then be hiding that for the rest of my life.
Exactly. Yeah. And my friends would be like, my friends that had kids, they'd be like, if you have any doubt, do not have them. And I'd be like, I have a lot of doubt.
Yeah, and you're like, don't do it. Well, I think this is a great segue to actually bring somebody on to our show who not only is an artist and a comedian, but also has a very different perspective than us, because she actually is a parent. So Jackie, why don't you bring on our amazing guest today?
And really watching Jan parent helped me forgive my mom too.
That's amazing. Jan and I are going to become friends after this. I hope.
Yeah, you're going to love Jan. I love our guest today with all my heart. She's been on Ferguson. She's Nick at Night's Mom of the Century. She's hilarious. She has some of my favorite jokes of all time. She's very original. Everybody should check her out. Please welcome Jan Davidson. Jan!
Oh, I should have put makeup on for this. Oh my God.
You look gorgeous.
Nice to meet you, Renee. And nice to see you, my friend Jackie.
Look at those bangs.
Nice you. I was YouTube stalking you, watching your comedy today. You're brilliant.
Oh, stop. No. Oh. I'm retired from comedy. I don't have any jokes for the new world order.
You're doing a lot of acting.
I have to figure out some stuff.
You're going to go back to comedy.
I was thinking about writing a joke. I was trying to write a joke that kind of compares a vaccination resistance to Impossible Burger resistance. I was like talking it out with another comedian, and I put him to sleep. So I was like, there's something.
But sometimes it just comes from when you're shelling out a joke. Like I use voice memos on my phone, and there'll be times where I'm like inspired. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, and I'll record something in the voice memo, and I listen to it back, and I'm like, it took me 45 minutes to get to that joke. That shit is not funny, and you realize like you're like hashing it out till you get to the funny. And
I had a dream where I know people talk about like I had a dream where I came up with a great joke. And then I woke up and I was like, wow, that joke actually tracks in waking life. And then I went back to sleep and I forgot it.
Oh,
and it
no.
You got to write that down, right?
I was still in sleep mode, so it probably doesn't make any sense.
Isn't that how J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter? I think it started as a dream that she woke up and wrote it on a notebook, and then Harry Potter became Harry Potter.
I woke up one. Oh, go ahead. I woke up one time with a joke. I was like, I treat my body like a temple that people want to stick things in. And I tweeted it, and that was the most tweets I ever got. I gotta find it because Rob Schneider retweeted it, and I got like 2,000 follows from it or something.
Wow.
It was from my sleep, yeah.
That's
retweeted by the greats.
Yes. Oh yes. Thank you.
Nobody important has ever retweeted anything.
Dan, is one of your children there?
Yeah, but he's not accessible. He's a few feet away, but yet a million miles away.
Hi, Connor.
How old are your kids?
They're your age, Renee.
They're my age.
So I just had to kind of figure this out because they're so old that I'm like, really? I don't know how old they are. So my son will be 29.
Whoa.
Thank you for thinking I'm 29. I'm in my 40s.
Wait, that's Jan's joke. Tell her your
and
joke.
My daughter will be there. Their birthdays are both in August. My daughter will be 27.
Will you tell her your joke about thank you? Just tell her that joke, please. Tell us all that joke.
No, she knows it. She sat through it.
She doesn't know it. I sent her the old one.
I'm not interested in my jokes.
Can I just say, okay. So Jan's like, I'm a mom. She's like, I used to be a mom. And then she's like, oh, I can see you're looking at me like, oh God, she's too young to be a mom. Her kids must have died. And then she's like, thank you for thinking I have dead babies, but they just grew up. But
they're so old that they're like kids today. They're like this other generation. This generation.
But you're not a grandma yet. That's pretty good. You're doing well.
That's good.
No, that's right. They both don't. Although that could be a comment to my parenting. They both don't think that they should have children.
Well,
we should stop the cycle. I don't know.
That's what we were just talking about. Why we?
We literally were just talking about that.
I want to say that I used to, when I talked to the kids about, because my kids grew up in the 90s, they were teeny in the 90s, and I had to kind of do the stranger danger thing, and the good touch, bad touch. That was the era of good touch, bad touch. Every child was being abused sexually. We discovered in the 90s. So I taught the kids.
I love that you think this is hilarious, Jackie.
We didn't call them privates. We called them inappropriates. They're genital.
Oh my God, my inappropriate. That's funny.
They're inappropriates.
That's really funny.
And so there was conversations like, Connor kicked me in my inappropriate.
That's so funny when kids when I was a nanny, I called them bits. Like I didn't know it came out one day where I was like, okay, they would be bathing, and they get to that age where it's like.
Did you grow up in the 80s?
I grew up in the 80s, yeah.
Because I think that my sister, who's like 7 years younger than me, I think I remember when she was little and her friends and their moms, with my mom calling privates bits. But I was from a really Catholic household, so we didn't even say it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I grew up very Catholic, but I don't know where I learned it. Like, it just came out one day and it just seemed very neutral, and it felt like then you didn't even have to have a title to it, and then it was not, I don't know, it just made it like less weird having conversations with kids. But
I don't think we ever even talked. I don't think my mom and I ever talked about.
So California to say vagina. Is your vagina hurt, honey?
Yeah, it's very like it's very like feminist, you know, where you can like fully pronounce your genitalia.
Honey, put your breast back in. I don't know how you. What are you talking about? I don't know, honey. Is your penis okay, honey? So it was just easier. So Boston Jan was inappropriates. Hey, your inappropriates are hanging out. Wow, I really messed them up.
Renee is from Cape Cod.
I'm from Cape Cod. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm a masshole too.
See, that's why you don't talk about genitals in Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's a rule. But
there's no genitals in Massachusetts.
But do you know how to spell the state rapid fire? Did they teach you that in school? I always felt like when I was you know how like everybody knows how to spell Mississippi really fast? Growing up in Massachusetts, like I was taught to spell the word Massachusetts very fast. And when people tried to test my Massachusettsness, they'd be like, spell Massachusetts really fast. And I was like, Massachussetts. Like if you weren't from Massachusetts, you couldn't spell the word fast.
I'm not good at spelling anything, but I think I'm good at spelling that.
Yeah, it was the only weird thing. The only thing I actually know how to spell is,
which is Ellsworth, which is also another spelling thing that doesn't make any sense. Well, so, Rhode Island doesn't make sense either.
No. Rhode Island, Jackie, Rhode Island. So we're all New Englanders, huh?
Yeah.
New England in the house.
Just now that I'm getting together with a group of New Englanders, have you guys seen the new OnStar commercial?
Mm-mm.
Where I don't know if it's new, but the woman, her car is off the side of the road and she's touched the OnStar. There was an accident. The firefighter comes down, and you hear the voiceover between the firefighter and the woman, and he says, "Ma'am, are you all right?" And she's like, "My son, is my son okay?" "Your son's fine." "Something was in the road." "You're safe now." I was like, wow. And you guys gotta look for it, OnStar commercial. And the visual is like this gorgeous, it's probably like Northern California, some gorgeous road, and it's really green and lush, like after a rain. But the fireman has this accent that makes my ears bleed. You're fine.
That's so funny. Oh, I love having
nothing but.
Well, so I feel like before we. Oh, sorry, Jack.
You brought your kid. How old were your kids when you brought them here?
Oh, so you guys were talking about that too, about changing location. It was easier to have a family in LA. Like Bostonians usually do go to New York. That's like normal. It's like a cheap move. Because if it doesn't work out, you can drive home that afternoon.
For sure, yeah.
You can just like get in the car and drive home that afternoon. So it's easier to drive to Boston than it is to drive to San Diego from LA. The 405 is a nightmare. So I wanted to move to New York when I was like college age. And then I met my husband and I had my kids. So then it was like, although when I was little, because I was little in the 80s, and the 80s is all about Beverly Hills and Los Angeles this and Los Angeles that, and with a little Australia thrown in. So those were like the paradise places. Beverly Hills, everything was Beverly Hills. Remember? Do you guys know?
Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah, and Melrose Place and all that.
But I'm thinking like Beverly Hills Cop, Troop Beverly Hills, Down and Out in Beverly Hills. lifestyles of the rich and famous. Everything was Beverly Hills. I had no idea what Beverly Hills was, just a bunch of offices and old people.
Yeah, neither did I.
Like
And
the
we all
most
thought Hollywood
unfun.
was like really beautiful and not a
Oh,
shithole,
God.
right?
Yeah, it's like the most unfun place. It was actually really fun to drive through it during pandemic with all the like the windows of the shops like all boarded up like apocalyptic. So I did kind of in my heart want to move to LA. Like that was the exotic idea to me. And so having kids, it just seemed like an easier lifestyle to move them to here. And I waited until my son was ready to go to middle school because that's kind of like the time you can't move around after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't move around after.
I lived in 8 different homes and went to 4 different high schools from 14 to 18, and it fucked me up bad.
Yeah,
not a good idea.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. So, although they're still not happy about it.
That's really funny.
They have
Jan's daughter lives in Spain.
Yeah.
Oh, how cool.
That's how much she left LA. She lives in Spain. She's so Boston though. She's so Boston.
She's Boston and Spain. That's what we need. Well, that is a great segue to sort of wrap up our show, because we thought one of the things that was great to bring you on is we wanted you to define what is normal. Our show's called Never Normal. What do you think normal is around parenting? And then Jackie's going to hit you with some rapid fire karaoke inquiries. So what do you think is normal? What is your definition of normal?
I guess, I mean, since we're talking to New England girls, anything that's not what we're doing, because everyone is considered weird. That's
wicked weird, right?
Wicked weird. You wicked weird.
Honestly, when I got to Santa Monica, where I raised my kids, I finally felt like I could breathe, because all the other mothers, like they were normal, but anyone in the world would consider that weird.
Yeah.
They were normal.
I love that, man.
Vagina to their daughters without making it loaded and worrying, like they were the best parents.
Yeah.
They were the best. And I was this broken person, and that was the most normal I'd ever felt. But anybody else would say they're weird.
And in New England, everybody was repressed. So you got to be with people that weren't repressed. And
Finally.
Finally.
My mother always said she hated Californians because they're all, what's with Californians? They're all weird and they're liberal and they got what's with the accents? They all sound retarded. I don't know if they sound retarded, Mom.
My daughter's dating a German boy, and he says so she's really Boston in her values, but in her persona, in her blondness and the way she talks, she's very LA.
Very LA.
And I don't know if you guys watched the awful episode of SNL this season, Saturday. Yeah, there was one sketch that was totally Helen, the Gen X emergency room. What is it? No, Gen Z emergency room.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Oh,
I didn't see
it's like everything is Helen, the way my daughter talks. It's like a scene out of the show Euphoria. So she talks, and that's funny because he's the first person to say she talks really slow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right, Jan, speaking of the opposite of slow, we are going to pepper you with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What is your favorite karaoke song?
Oh, it's, Don't Stop Believing. Sorry.
That's right.
Yes. That's a great one.
Who would you, if you could talk to anybody living or dead, who would it be?
Oh my God. You guys right now. How many people say that?
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah!
You win!
We can end there. That's too good.
That's way too good.
That's
Jan,
way too
you
good.
were such a delight. Thank you for coming on to our show. For those of you watching this, we are taking a pause because Jackie and I are going into production for season 3. So
Oh my god.
keep your eyes peeled because Never Normal is about to get fantastic, everybody.
It's already fantastic.
So thank you, Jan. We already are fantastic. Get involved. But now more people will be able to get involved. Get involved.
Yeah.
Get involved.
We love you, Jan. Thank you. I can't wait to see you.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't wait to see you in Reels. All right.
I need to hug you.
You can.
Are you
I'm all
vaccinated?
vaccinated.
Good.
Yes, we're all
Oh,
vaccinated too.
Yay!
Yay.
Glad you're
Thank you so
vaccinated.
much. So nice meeting you. Bye. Jackie Monahan, I love you.
I love you.
Thank you for being you.
Thank you for being you. We'll figure this out.
We're going to figure this out. You're the best. Thank you, everybody. We will see you soon. Stay posted here on our website because we're going to have a lot of new updates, and season 3 is going to be fantastic. Thank you guys for joining us.
Get ready. We love you. Thank you for joining us.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Happy everything.